How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome to your 2020 year ahead horoscope for Sagittarius, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. In this video, we're going to be going over all of the major transits of 2020 by each quarter and how they'll be affecting you. And now, while there is a lot of astrology happening next year, we're going to be briefly going over the major events so you guys have a general idea of what's going to be going on for you guys this year. Now, if you would like a more in-depth and specific analysis of what's going to be happening for you for 2020, please be sure to check out my website where you guys can purchase a year ahead reading from me, where I'm going to be going over all of the specific transits and the big major events that are going to be affecting you specifically for your chart for 2020. And if you like this year ahead horoscope and you also like weekly horoscopes and monthly horoscopes, please be sure to check out my page and subscribe for all of the latest astrology info and updates. And also follow me on Twitter if you guys like to talk about astrology and engage with me, as well as a bunch of other astrologers. If you're not on astrology Twitter, get on there already. And if you'd like to support me and my work and get access to exclusive content and knowledge about astrology, be sure to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/whitelightastrology. And now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So before we even begin 2020, we're ending 2019 off with Jupiter moving into Capricorn. Now, you guys should definitely know what Jupiter is all about, and that's expansion, fun, our belief, our philosophy, spirituality, as well as, basically gifts and good things. That's what Jupiter is all about. However, the problem is with Jupiter moving to Capricorn is that Jupiter is moving into a sign of fall, meaning it doesn't operate as well as it could usually there. It doesn't have the availability to the resources that it needs to get the job done that it needs to do or that it wants to do. And so Jupiter in Capricorn is a lot about making do with what you have and kind of like squeezing the most juice out of all the oranges that you kind of have. Now, with Jupiter going into Capricorn, it's going to be there for the whole year, but it's going into your second house of money, of finances, what you own and what you physically possess and what is yours. Now, as Jupiter does go through your second house, this is really going to be focusing on what money do you have and how do you make it work for you in the best way possible. And this is going to be a huge theme as we continue on for the rest of the year. And as you guys should already know, with Saturn and Pluto being in your second house, that there's some money themes coming on this year. But as we actually move into 2020 with Saturn and Pluto conjoining each other, this is basically the big first thing that we've got, or the first big thing that we've got going on. And the best way to describe it, since it is such a big transit, it is such a big deal, and I don't have enough time today to really explain everything in detail, is that Pluto has been really changing things up for a long time, and especially in your second house of money and finances. And as Saturn comes up to Pluto, this is about addressing the problem at the source. This is about really containing the fire. And as Saturn conjoins Pluto to start this year off in your second house, this is about how do we take on these responsibilities and these obligations and kind of put the fire out when it comes to what's going on with your money, what's going on with your finances, and how do you deal with ownership. But then after that, we get the first Mercury retrograde of the year, the first out of 3 Mercury retrogrades that we're going to have. This one being in Pisces. Now, we did have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in 2019, so it will be useful to use what happened to you in 2019 during that Mercury retrograde is going to be very similar to what happens to you this year with the Mercury retrograde in Pisces. But again, this is a Mercury retrograde, all about rethinking, reviewing, replanning, re-strategizing, going over things again. And this is in the sign of Pisces, where Mercury's in its detriment, so it doesn't work as well there, and things can be a little bit more frustrating. Things can be a little bit more confusing than usual. But as Mercury retrogrades through Pisces, it will be retrograding in your 4th house. So this has to do with your family, your home life, your private life, your parents. And as Mercury retrogrades through here, you might have some miscommunications with them or miscommunication with your roommates, or maybe some different ideas of what to do with this. But then right after that, we get one of the major events this year, and that's Saturn moving into Aquarius. Now, Saturn is the planet of limitations, of rules, of structures, discipline, all of that kind of stuff. And as it moves out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, there's a big theme change that's going on. And that theme is Saturn and Capricorn being focused on our structures, how we've built things, how the system is working for us, versus Saturn and Aquarius is getting us more connected and having us work harder on an idealistic level, on our ideas more. This is more of a logical thing than a tangible thing on how to implement ourselves in the best way. And for us Sagittarius risings, this is going into our 3rd house of our ability to do things and how we utilize ourselves. So Saturn dips into Aquarius, the theme is really going to change from focusing on what restrictions you have with your money to how do you really utilize yourself, and what are the best ways you can do that? So we're actually ending the fourth quarter with Jupiter conjoining Pluto. Now, again, like I said before, with Jupiter and Capricorn, this is about kind of, making the best out of a crappy situation and really utilizing what we have for ourselves. And as Jupiter conjoins Pluto, this is going to be a time of kind of changing our beliefs on what is possible to create and kind of getting innovative and creative on how we can utilize what we do have to get out of this sticky situation. Now, when Jupiter comes back to join Pluto again later on this year is when we're going to realize that those things actually end up working, but we're going to talk about that later. But then as we get into the second quarter of 2020 is when we're going to have the nodes switch signs. Now, the nodes are just points on a chart to show us where the eclipses are going to be at any given time, and the eclipses are now going to be in Gemini and Sagittarius starting in May. Now, the north node is the direction that we're wanting to move into, what we're wanting to consume, where we're going. And as that goes into Gemini, the sign of ideas, the sign of communication, the sign of information, we're going to be more geared towards going in that area of understanding what information is being presented in front of us. What do we know right now? Versus the south node, where we've been, where we came from, where we're letting go of in a sense, is going to be in Sagittarius. What our beliefs are, what our expectations are, what vision we may have. And as the north node moves into Gemini and the south node moves into Sagittarius, the north node is going to be moving into your 7th house of relationships. So this is going to be a time where you're more pulled and more focused towards the relationships that you have in your life and what's going on with them. And while the south node goes through Sagittarius in your 1st house, this is more about letting go and not necessarily focusing on yourself and bringing that focus that's usually on yourself into relationships. Now, the other big thing with this too is while these eclipses are going on, Venus then is going to station retrograde in Gemini, which is one of the bigger highlights for this year. As Venus is in the sign of Gemini, she's looking for stimulation because Venus is the planet of love, relationships, the planet that wants you to indulge and enjoy all the nice things that you like. And as she's in Gemini, she's looking for stimulation. She's looking for understanding, learning something new, having fun, being social. But as Venus retrogrades, this is where we have that change or that shift in value, and we start to seek something else that stimulates us more and that brings us more value. Now, this is happening in your 7th house of relationships, so this might be a relationship change. A relationship might come to you during this time as well. This is going to be a good time to really look at who are the individual relationships you have in your life, not just romantically, but casually, professionally. And are you getting what you want from them, or are you not? But then we end the second quarter with the second Mercury retrograde of the year, and this one will be in Cancer. Now, of course, Mercury retrogrades are reflecting, reviewing, and this is the sign of Cancer. This is about nurturing. This is about what our needs are. This is about where we need to trust and what we need to protect. Now, this Mercury retrograde is going to be happening in your 8th house of death, of inheritance, of other people's money and shared resources. So during this time, this is going to be a really good time to really reflect and go over what's going on for you in that financial area that might be hidden, that might be unknown, and what needs to be addressed in a mercurial way of getting the clear answers, getting the results you're looking for, understanding it in an educated way, and handle that. Now, as we start the third quarter of 2020, that's when we're going to have Saturn retrogress back into Capricorn. We're not done just yet. When we were focused on trying to utilize ourselves in the best way and, again, squeeze all the juice that we can out of ourselves, but as Saturn goes back into Capricorn, we still have responsibilities, we still have obligations to handle when it comes to money, when it comes to what we own, what we possess, what kind of income is actually coming in for us. But then right after that is when we're going to have Mars enter its shadow. Now, at this point, Mars is going to be in Aries in its home sign where it's really energized, it's really drove up to want to do stuff, kind of do everything that it possibly can. But Mars is in your 5th house of love, of romance, of children, of art and creativity. Mars is a malefic planet, so it can bring fights and conflicts. It wants to heat up, it severs, and it cuts, and it stings sometimes. But Mars is going through this 5th house of yours where you're wanting to focus more on the things that bring you joy and doing those things. You may be hitting a roadblock. And as Mars enters shadow and starts to slow down, you might feel that roadblock sinking in more and more and more. But then 3 days later is when we're going to have Venus actually leave its shadow and start to gain new territory. And as Venus goes out of its shadow and goes direct in Gemini, this is when that stimulation that you're looking for in relationships starts to become more received, and you can start finding and bringing more of that in, which is super exciting. And then from about August 4th till the 27th is when we're going to be having Mars square Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And this is where you'll start to realize, as Mars is slowing down and you're wanting to do the things that you want, that you may not have the funds for it. You may not have the availability to the money that you have for you to start enjoying more of your hobbies or doing more of the things that you want, and you may have a roadblock here. But then we end the third quarter with Mars stationing retrograde. And as it stations retrograde, this is where Mars has to, before it can move forward, it has to go back and it has to address what's stopping it. And for you guys, as Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are squaring it in your second house, then you might have some money issues that are coming in, or money issues around you wanting to pursue certain hobbies or interests or something that's fun for you, and you may have to realize, like, oh, I have to get my money situation handled before I can continue moving forward. And as we go into the fourth and final quarter of 2020, this is the big show. This is like the grand finale. This is when it gets crazy. And we start that off with Mars, now retrograde, squaring Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter for the first month. And this is that time, again, where you actually address the issues. You handle them. You take the responsibility. And before you can move forward, you got to take care of what you left behind. And that's basically what's going to be going on then. But then we'll have the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And this will be the third and final Mercury retrograde of 2020. During this time, as Mercury retrogrades, this is, again, reflecting, reviewing, going back over things like Mercury retrogrades are always about. This time in the sign of Scorpio, where hidden things can kind of come up, where, truth is revealed and the secrets kind of come out. And as Mercury retrogrades in Scorpio, it is going to be going through your 12th whole sign house. Now, the 12th house is all about repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself, things that you weren't aware of or that you didn't see. And as Mercury retrogrades through here, this is where things are going to be coming up that you might not have known about yourself, that you didn't realize, or that you might not have thought through all the way, or that you didn't even think of. And this Mercury retrograde happened before in 2019. It's actually, I'm recording while Mercury's about to station retrograde. So reflect on what happened to you during November of 2019, because it's definitely going to be showing up for you later on in November or October of 2020. But then we have Jupiter coming back to conjoin Pluto. And this is, again, like we talked about earlier, with Jupiter kind of really utilizing what we have and the best of our abilities. As it comes back to conjoin Pluto, if you've remained faithful, if you've had that trust, once it conjoins Pluto, I think that this is going to be a very revolutionizing time for you and your finances and you and your money on what you do with it and how it works for you. Because as Jupiter conjoins Pluto, this is kind of really changing the foundation of what your beliefs are around money and your relationship with money and what you do with it, how you utilize it, how it comes in, and how you get it. And then what's nice about Jupiter conjoining Pluto is once we have this realization of what we can do and how once we trusted our faith and trusted ourselves with what to do and it turns out and it works for us, the next day we have Mars stationing direct and starting to move forward in Aries. That's when we can actually start doing what we want to do, or at least going towards that direction more. Mars will still be squaring Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto, but during this time you'll at least be able to focus on what you want to do and be able to, you've already addressed the problems that were holding you back. Now it's about moving towards that area and, going over the obstacles that life will eventually present you. But then once we get to about the end of November into the beginning of December, we have the second set of eclipses this year, this time with the focus on Sagittarius. So this is when you're going to be looking at yourself and kind of going, all right, what do I need to address about me so I can then start to move forward and go towards the relationships that I want to focus now in my life. And so this is going to be a really big time of really reflecting on who you are, what you do, and where this is the time to kind of not necessarily be about you, but be about other people. But then we end 2020 off with the grand finale, and that is Jupiter and Saturn both moving into Aquarius and conjoining each other in Aquarius. Now, again, this is a bigger long-term transit that I recommend you guys look into so you can have more of an understanding of what it means. However, as Jupiter moves into Aquarius, it's starting to get a breath of fresh air where Jupiter can actually expand itself and make some room and get comfortable. Jupiter is going to connect us. That's that Aquarius word of like literally literally like connecting ourselves with things. And as Jupiter goes through a third house of your ability to do stuff, learning, teaching, short distance travel, siblings and neighbors, there's a lot that Jupiter is wanting to introduce into your life. But with, all the things that Jupiter is going to bring you comes a lot of responsibilities. And that's Saturn's role of going into your third house, is while you are going to be wanting and finding opportunities to utilize yourself more, there's a whole new tone of seriousness to it. And that's basically how we're ending 2020 and going into 2021 with a whole new perspective and a whole new mindset to go under things with. And so with that being said, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking, sharing, commenting, describing this. If you guys want a more specific and detailed analysis of your 2020, please go to my website, get a reading from me. I'd love to go over your chart with you and let you know what's going on for you this year. And with that being said, again, thank you guys so much, and I'll be seeing you next time.